This event not only scared me, but questioned my faith in humanity. I'm 35 years old, but was 28 at the time of this story. I'm a mortician and got my first job in my hometown in rural Tennessee at a funeral home. This happened in the first year I was there. It was the start of my career after graduating school, and the funeral director was a close friend of my family. I have seen a lot of heartbreaking situations in my time there, but this one takes the cake. One night, I was called by the owner to pick up a recently deceased. I went to the funeral home and picked up the van. As I arrived at the residence, I immediately recognized it as the Parker residence. 3 months prior, we went there to pick up Mr. Parker, and I was over his preparation and service. His widow was a very sweet woman, and my heart sunk knowing who I was picking up. I got out, pulled the gurney out of the back of the van, and knocked on the door. A woman in her 30s answered the door, and I introduced myself. She was in tears, and she introduced herself as Mrs. Parker's daughter and hospice nurse. As I pushed the gurney inside, she told me that she was in the next room. I maneuvered through the doorway to a hospital-like bed where she was laying. As I was preparing to move her from the bed to the gurney, her daughter stated that she took her vitals and pulse just to make sure. I nodded, pulled out the gurney, and gently wrapped her in a sheet. As I loaded her into the van, the daughter stated she wanted her to be cremated and to start tonight. It struck me as odd that she wanted it rushed, but I said I'd take care of her. She said she'd come by in the morning to start planning the service, and we said goodbye. As I drive back towards the funeral home, I realized I kept hearing something moving, but I shrugged it off as road noise. All of a sudden I hear what sounded like a raspy breath, but realized that there might have been air in her lungs and it was just escaping. As I reach the main road in town, I hear a whimper from behind me and a weak, "Help me." This scared the shit out of me, and I slid to the side of the road to a screeching halt. I turned around towards the back and said, "Hello?" I noticed the sheet slowly moving, and once again I hear, "Help me, please." I reach back, pull back the sheet, and see a very much alive Mrs. Parker. I grabbed my cell and called 911. I told her help is on the way, and she starts sobbing. What she said next sent chills down my spine. "She tried to kill me." I asked who, and she said her daughter's name. I was speechless and held her hand until the ambulance and police arrived. They took my statement, loaded her into the ambulance, and gave her oxygen. A few days later, I found out what happened. After Mr. Parker's passing, the daughter was tired of taking care of her mother and waiting for her inheritance, so she took a pillow and tried smothering her. She figured the cremation would wipe away all the evidence, hence the hastiness of it. She was sent to prison for attempted murder and is still there. To be honest, I hope she rots in there for what she did to her own mother. This story was shared by my mother, who was an adult in Washington state during the surge of killings we had. My mother was definitely an independent woman, but in a somewhat tragic sense. She was only 12 when she started her life alone. She worked through a number of odd jobs, and with countless people that she wouldn't even look at today. She had just been getting off work one day when it began raining. She had no jacket, and no ride to her shared apartment where her friends were waiting for her. She was waiting on a bus that would pick her up on a dark corner of the road. This particular stretch of road was well known for the prostitution scene, and a few men had driven by casually asking for her services, something my mother laughs at today. She was not, and is not, and has no plans on being a prostitute. That's what made what happened next so strange. A beat-up truck drove by, stopping in the rain, and the driver rolled down his window.
"Not a good street to be walking down,"
he told her, his voice calm and smooth. "Yeah," she replied. I'm just waiting on the bus. My friends are waiting for me. The man pondered this for a moment, looking around suspiciously, and then back to her.
It's not a safe place to be,
he began.
I could give you a ride to the next bus stop down the road,
he offered. Hitchhiking was not new to my mother, and she knew how to handle herself. She sighed and nodded, escaping the rain and entering the man's truck. He was jittery and obviously a bit nervous.
Do you like to party?
He asked, keeping his eyes solid on the road. Not really, my mom replied, being honest. I'm just trying to survive with work right now, she would joke. The man didn't laugh. He kept insisting that she come with him to party, to which she always responded, No, I'm meeting my friends and I can't be late. The truck pulls to a stop on an empty street, and the man speaks up.
I have a gun,
he says, almost too calmly.
Does that frighten you?
Somewhat shocked, my mother replied. No, I grew up around them. The man simply nodded and kept driving. They eventually stopped at a Burger King where he dropped her off. Before she could leave, he stopped her, somewhat upset.
Hey, don't forget your hairbrush,
he said, almost in a command. He held up a small hairbrush from the seat, looking her dead in the eyes with a cold, straight stare. That's not mine, my mom replied, but was stopped.
This is your hairbrush,
he insisted, getting angry. My mother, not wanting to start any trouble, nodded and took it before the man drove off. She looked over the strange object and then tossed it in the nearby trash can. Years later, she would get a job working at Dynacraft, a section of Kenworth in their Renton warehouse. There she would see the man again, working the front desk. She never spoke to him and knew him only as Gary. But she came to find out he was known as Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, who was the most prolific serial killer in American history, being convicted of 49 murders. He was arrested just months after my mother started working there, and she will never forget that faithful ride when she was picked up by him. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you email it to urmaker6260@gmail.com. And if you would like to gain early access to my videos, as well as some other cool perks, make sure you go check out my Patreon page. It's a great way for you guys to support the channel and get some cool perks out of it. I appreciate you watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.
Not a good street to be walking down,
he told her, his voice calm and smooth.
Yeah,
she replied. Do you like to party? He asked.
Yeah,
she replied. I have a gun, he says, almost too calmly.
Does that frighten you? Yeah,
she replied.